going to sit here.
All right, lad.
I'm sitting right here. So, hey everybody. So, Phil, born and raised in Liverpool. Where are you living now?
Oh, I'm living in the Hudson Valley.
Ooh.
Oh, yes.
A bit posh that.
Oh, yes, indeed. Although it's not far from, the great, rock and roll festival place up there.
Yes, Woodstock. Woodstock.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Or might not.
We just did this before, and it's brilliant. Phil explained, you don't need 700 pages. Phil explained the history of British accents from London in the south all the way to Edinburgh in Scotland.
Well, my theory, of course, is that it's all to do with the weather. The fact is, that's why the British don't do anything but talk about the weather. I said, how's it look? Oh, I think it's going to rain today. That sort of thing was all the opening. But London is on, I don't know if you know this, but it's all on marshland. And it's so, what happens with marshland is people get very sort of languid and can't think. So I talk like that a bit, It's very old for them to talk without having an accent like that, And as it goes up the country, of course, it gets to Birmingham, and then there it gets a bit colder, so they talking like this, Hey, are you going out today? They talk like that. It's a bit chilly, And by the time they get to Yorkshire, up north of England, by heck, it's blowing bloody cold up here on the moors, isn't it? Aye. Right, lad, but by the time you get to Scotland and you've got a kilt on and it's blowing up and you're not wearing underpants, it's like, oh, God, okay, it's bloody freezing up here, I'll tell you.
That makes more sense than anything. Phil Kenzie's History of the British Language, of the UK language. Hey, Chris, guys, if we could get a little more monitor here in the front, if you guys could do it, thank you so much. Have we found another Liverpudlian?
Born in Liverpool, here he is, Rock and Roll Hall of Famer, Jim McCarty.
Jim McCarty from the Yardbirds. Come join us. Mr. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, please sit down and join us. Jim, great to see you again. Yes, sit and join us. We're talking about Liverpool, and we just did the history of accents, as Phil explained, from London in the south where it's marshland, and as it gets colder, the accent changes more and more as we go. It gets tighter till we get to Scotland, and it's that. Would you do your Scottish accent again? Do your Scottish? Aye. Would you do it, lad?
No way I can do a Scottish accent.
You did it before.
Oh, you're talking.
Aye. You could do it again.
Well, that's why I was not cold. I didn't have my kilt on, did I?
So the first drummer in Wings, Denny Sywell, Paul hires him, and Denny, I made him tell the story sitting right where you are. He says, you come up to the farm in Scotland, and we're going to record, and we're going to play. Okay, how do I get there? He said, well, you get to this town, and then just ask anybody, and they'll tell you how to find me. Okay, he gets to the town. Excuse me, sir, I'm the drummer for Paul McCartney. How do I get to his farm? Aye. You hit a raid, but he's got a great hand.
Is that it?
What? He goes, thank you. Next person. Excuse me, do you know where Paul, he goes into the pub, right? Hey, excuse me, I'm the drummer from America. Where's Paul's farm? Aye. He goes, 20 minutes, I have no idea where I'm going. The wheels are coming off the car, I'm hitting rocks and rust. It takes me 2 hours. I finally figure it out. And Paul says, did you have trouble finding it? Which I learned, never ask directions in Scotland in the rural areas. I could get by in Edinburgh. Even Glaswegian can get a little tough.
Oh, exactly. During the war, in Liverpool and Glasgow, there was issued a white paper, they called it, to all the American troops of on no account were they to get into any altercations with Liverpoolians or Glaswegians. It was a hell of a city. There is a book, in fact, called No Mean City. I don't know if you know that one, but it came out in the 30s, I think, but it's very much about how Glasgow toughies, as it were, would walk around with a razor in each top pocket and basically slice you up if you would at all dare to offend them in any way. You know,
because that's changed a lot, Glasgow, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Now it's a really classy place. But
Now it's the Garden City of Europe.
and it was the worst slums in Europe.
Yeah, I took a lot of white paint, I bet you.
The Gorbals in the worst in Europe.
Hey, Jim, you were born there. Have you gone back to Liverpool much?
I haven't been back for a while, but I used to go back because my mother was born up there, and I was born there as well. I was born in Walton, and I came down during in the war, you know, with the family.
So I'll tell you, this past winter, you know, my dear friend Billy J. Kramer, many of you have been at the fest. You've seen him many, many times. Love him dearly. And Billy said to me, he'd gone home, his brother is still up there, and is not doing well, and he went back to visit and see him and take care of, see family. And I said, how was Liverpool? And he said, Ken, I couldn't believe it. I got lost. Hey? He goes, I was walking around. I didn't know where I was. He said, you have to remember how small this... You didn't walk 4 blocks without running into somebody you knew. He goes, I didn't know where I was. And to me, in Manhattan, been living there, been in New York, go to Manhattan now, which I know like the back of my hand, you go to the West Village. Now, when you go past the 10th Avenue, it was the meat market. It was a meat packing district. I have no idea where I am. All the streets are gone, the shops are gone, there's buildings, and it's happened to me. So I see when something's been built out.
And furthermore, I mean, you know, the Liverpool after the war, a lot of the people, as you say, a lot of slum houses and things like that, and sort of people didn't wash that much, what have you, and they started washing the buildings. And they did. They did. They washed all the buildings, and they, you know, if you looked at Liverpool from the other side, it was black. He said, now it's white. And it's really confusing, that is.
Well,
clean is a weird word.
And what happened to the cabin? Because they changed it, didn't they?
They moved it.
Yeah.
It's still on Matthew Street, but they moved it. And
it was the car park or something, wasn't it?
But
changed.
The thing is, when they explain, and Jim talked about it the other day, about how small, how tight it was. And like Billy always said, by the grace of God, a fire didn't break out. We're all smoking. It's so hot. It's over 100 degrees. As he said, the walls were dripping.
Well, they had no cooling, so...
That's for sure.
I mean, when you got a big act in there, it would draw the people in, the kids would pack them in there like crazy. And as I say, walking across the floor with your amp or something, you could feel the air going up your pants. You remember that? You could feel the air. Oh, they're going, oh, what the hell's that?
And it smelled of that cleaner, you know, Dettol.
Oh,
I don't know what that is in the US. What's like a industrial cleaner?
Yeah.
I have to explain that these kind of Cavendish walls, what they call like that, were built underneath buildings in Liverpool, and a lot of those buildings had the most bizarre things in them because ships used to come into Liverpool, things like bananas, for example, and they'd have a ton of bananas down there, of course, with all the insects that came with them. You could literally see tarantulas on the walls down there.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Nobody ever told that story before.
Oh, yeah. Liverpool was a hive of foreign insects underneath in all those caves and things under there.
Jeez.
So the cabin, they had to kind of clean it out every once in a while.
You know, you see the image of the 4 of them in there, how tight it was. And I don't think you have a sense of how small that stage really was.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was one arch.
Right. Seriously, guys, if you remember, if you look at this stage, how wide was the stage? If you could see it, was it the size of this drum riser?
There to there.
From this chair, from that speaker to from where Jim is to this chair.
That line there that you see. Well, if I'm looking at speakers, it wouldn't be that speaker to that speaker. Maybe a little wider than that, but about that.
About 3 of these.
Yeah.
That's
I mean, You know, quite tightly.
Right. And as what Jim said yesterday was about when you had to move your gear out, the next band had to come on.
Well, they had the same arch.
I mean, getting in and off that stage is a production and a half.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we played, my band was the Pressmen at that time with a guitar player called Richie Prescott, who was one of the better guitar players. He taught himself really well. He was always said about Richie Prescott, he played every Scotty Moore solo there was to play. Yeah. You know, he knew all of them. And Scotty Moore being the guitar player used to play with Elvis, you know. Anyway, you know, the Beatles were coming back from Germany, and amazingly brave of them, they came back with black leather and sort of black, almost turtleneck T-shirts on, and the temperature in the cabin was 108. Yeah, can you believe that? So we were going on stage, but they invited us to play the same night, and in fact they arrived back with only so much of their gear, and I think they were either missing or lost an amp somehow. And so they asked that Richie wouldn't lend them his amp, but Dave Roberts, the rhythm guitar player, he lent him his amp. And there's a picture online you can see today with Paul sitting in the front with his leg up like this, and there's an amp underneath. That's our amp. How dare they, you know?
So we've got a few more.
But yeah, literally though, you had to load your own gear on, and each band had its own gear. So as you're coming in from this tiny little dressing room, supposedly, at the back here, which is where, in fact, was taken up partly by the DJ, Bob Wooler, who was by the wall with a microphone giving his you know, story out to the front. And as we're passing him, and the Beatles are trying to get on, and we're going on, we're literally dripping on each other. And they're saying, sorry about that, you know, and they're swishing their hair like this, and, you know, spray is going everywhere, just trying to get in. By the time you got on the stage, you were drenched, you literally, you know, so it was quite a, and by the crowd then, of course, would all press forward. Next thing you know, it's almost like you're getting a steam bath.
God. So we have a few more Liverpudlians joining us today. I'd like to bring the Collins up on stage. Colin Hall from the Quarrymen, Colin Hanton. Let me put you guys over here. And David Bedford. David, great to see you again, mate. How you been? Good. Please come join us. You know what?
Come and join us. Come and join us.
We were talking about the cavern, Colin, about how tight it was, and I said, how big was the stage? And we're trying. By the way, I didn't really plan this, but I realized the jacket I'm wearing.
I noticed.
Yes. Yes. Oh, am I allowed to stay?
You're absolutely right.
Right.
You're
Right.
good.
Yeah. It's good.
Just got it wasn't a blue jacket, but Everton, it would have been thrown off by now.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
So, if Mets, Yankees, Jets, Giants, and we have to explain Liverpool and Everton.
Yeah.
Well, and the mailboxes are painted the two different colors, right?
No, come on.
That's a myth.
That's a myth, yeah.
Go use the
That's a
mic.
myth we started years ago, and he still believes it.
Okay, so let's go down the line. Liverpool or Everton?
Liverpool.
Liverpool.
Liverpool or Everton?
No, probably Liverpool.
Jim, what is that? No, you have to say in the mic.
Everton.
David?
You said
Sad boy.
Everton. Oh,
He's
Everton,
a
the
blue.
Yardbirds, get off the stage.
It's Mets, Yankees. It's, you know, it's Giants, Jets.
It's in the family.
That's just another one of the main reasons for fighting in Liverpool.
Oh, yeah. You're
Yeah.
born taking sides.
One of the worst days, of course, is St. Patrick's Day, because if you're either, as they say, from the lodge, which is the Orange Lodge, or you're a Catholic. And it was just, whenever you played a gig on one of those days, it was 10 to 1 there was going to be a fight breaking out. I remember playing one gig, and our drummer had his kit, and he's been ready to play. He said there was a weird thing going on in the hall. It was Litherland Town Hall. Right. And we were just playing, and they seemed to be separating on either side of the room. And we thought, what the hell is going on? And all of a sudden, and excuse the F word, the gentleman took a chair from the side of the thing, put it in the middle, stood on it, looked at the other side and said, "Up the effing lodge."
Yeah.
And he disappeared in a million bodies.
And that was the end of the gig, pretty
And
much.
at that point, our drummer picked his entire kit up in his hand and was staggering off the back of the stage.
What century was that? Wasn't this century?
Oh,
A
yeah.
long, long time ago.
What's that, sorry?
You said, what, you said, when was that?
When was that?
You
Yeah,
said,
what
what
century?
century?
What century? Well, it was, probably early 60s, before the Beatles, got their first big record, as it were.
So, by the way, you mentioned Litherton Town Hall. As Billy J always said, that's the first place that he saw the Beatles.
Yeah.
And he was just with his mates and walked out and he said, they're going to be bigger than Elvis. And all his mates said to him, you're drinking. He said, I was drinking, but I'm telling you, those guys. He said, you just knew. And forgive me, I don't remember the name of the venue that just burned down from fire.
At New
Club
Club Mall
Moore
Hall.
Hall.
Club Moore.
Which is it?
Club Moore.
Yeah, New Club Mall Hall.
So, Colin, tell me about the
Well, this is Colin Hannon. He should tell you because he
Colin, tell
played
me
it.
about it.
Well, it was one of two gigs that we used to play fairly regularly and get paid for. It was run by a promoter called Charlie McBain. He had a gig in Garston called the Wilson Hall, where we first went as a talent contest. We didn't get anywhere, but he saw something in us he liked, so he booked us to play regularly, and we got like 10 shillings each, which doesn't sound like an awful lot, but back then, for 10 shillings, you probably could have gone to the pitches for 4 or 5 times, you know what I mean? So we were playing there for a while, and then he said to us, I've got another gig over at the back Broadway called the Club Moore Hall, you see. He said, would you go and play there? So John said, of course we will. So, well, you'll have to get 2 buses. See, from Walton to Garston was 1 bus, but to the Club Moore Hall you have to have 2 buses. But John said, no, if you're paying, we'll definitely go. So we started playing at the Club Moore Hall.
And remember, you have to bring your equipment. You know, there's no van, there's no road.
Yeah, I
You're
know.
carrying your stuff.
Yeah, take my drums, put them underneath the stairs in the back of the bus, go up and have a smoke. Because we all smoked in those days, didn't we? Come down and they were, more or less they were still there.
Yeah.
But
Well,
it was when we were at the Club Moore Hall that Paul decided to do a guitar solo, you know. So we were playing and came to Paul's guitar solo and silence. He just, in his own words, he said his fingers just froze and he couldn't do anything. So
Wow.
John just laughed and turned around and said, he's all right, he's our new lad. So there was no big deal. We were just sort of amateurs, weren't we? We just carried on. And then when we came off, like Paul said, I'm never ever trying that again. So, but he said, I know somebody who can do it. And that was George.
And it was just a fire, an accidental fire, David, that took this out?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, actually, it was arson.
Was it?
But not at the Club Moore Hall. There's CCTV of a man setting fire to a children's nursery next door.
Oh.
But it went from the nursery to a wooden fence, and from the wooden fence it jumped onto the Club Moore Hall. I went to see it, you know.
I saw pictures on Facebook of my dear friend Jackie Spencer, wonderful tour guide who we love,
Yeah.
of you and Jackie going through the ruins.
Oh,
It
he
was
saw it, yeah.
It was
Yeah.
heartbreaking.
It was, yeah. I went up, had to touch the stage. It was just,
Oh.
yeah. But it was, don't make me cry, come on.
No, but you know what? The thing is, to me, to us, we love the music, and the places where the music was created are treasures.
Yeah.
You know, like other people look at a painting, seeing Aintree Institute, seeing the these are treasures to all of us. If we go see it.
But I mean, they are insured, and they have started a GoFundMe page, so it will be recreated.
Good.
It won't be the same place, but it will be almost right. But we're talking about the Litherland Town Hall before.
Yeah.
Chas Newby was the bass player on the Liverpool Town Hall when they came back from Hamburg without Stewart, because he used to play with the Pete Best band, Blackjacks. So when they came back without a bass player, it was Pete Best who said, you know, he can play it. So he said he was the first left-handed bass player to be in the Beatles.
Well, there was another place that I went to visit, the Aintree Institute.
Yeah,
So,
that's long gone.
It's gone.
Yeah, Aintree Institute's gone.
The
quite
thing I
years.
remember most about visiting the Aintree Institute, this is maybe 20 years ago.
Yeah.
There was, to commemorate it, you go into the pub, and you go up these regular stairs, and above this room, this like dance hall, is like just a piece of oak tag with some plastic in front of it, handwritten Beatles' first performance. And there was just a piece of plastic in front of it. It probably cost £3 to put the sign up. And I always thought, you couldn't do better than that? This moment, I mean, we could make at least a nicer sign by ourselves out here. You couldn't make more, but it was just like, you know, I went downstairs to be polite and bought a drink. I said to the bartender, so so the Beatles first played up there, right? And he said, yeah. Okay. No, if that's all, I mean, it just didn't seem like much. And, you know.
Well, I mean, really, in Liverpool, the Beatles at the time, they were just accepted. You know, Liverpudlians didn't sort of hold them on high. You know what I mean? It was just, was just the Liverpudlians. It was no really big deal for Scousers.
What more information do you need?
They
played there.
But it's such a Liverpool answer, isn't it?
Yeah,
They
what more
played here?
information?
Yeah.
Did the Beatles play it? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's, by the way, that was Yogi Berra. If you want to, why Yogi was so funny, it was exactly that. Yogi would just answer the question you asked, not interpret it.
Did the Beatles live here? Yeah.
That's as Liverpool as it gets.
Did I play with the Quarrymen? Yeah.
We're out to dinner. I have friends from London, and Billy J and his late wife Ronnie, and we were having dinner out in Brooklyn. Michael's of Brooklyn, my favorite place. And my friend Ralph from London says to Billy, "Billy, do you get back to Liverpool much?" And he said, "No." And you know, it sounds like it's being rude, but it's not.
You ask a question, you get an answer.
Yeah.
It's being brief.
A direct one.
But it's 100% accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to look after John's house, you know, in Liverpool for Yoko and the National Trust, and sometimes you get asked questions, and there isn't, you know, like people would say, so did they play in the front porch? And I say yes.
Yeah.
And what? So people say,
Go on. Go on.
go on.
Colin,
And
what's the story?
Well, they did.
Yeah.
But you know, they didn't play.
You can't win with Liverpool, do you? They're always looking for the next comedic moment.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of comedians come from Liverpool.
You've got to be comedians and live there.
Yeah.
They didn't.
Well, I put it, David, I think it's the other way around.
Yeah.
Everyone who lives there is a comedian.
Absolutely right. And we'll always get the last word.
Well, that's because you have to be.
So the answer would be, you know, they didn't play tick, or they didn't play hide and seek. They played their guitars. And,
Nice.
and,
There was a thing, I forget, Colin, whether you were talking about it or I was talking about it with Phil, about after the Beatles left, there was a sense of loss, of resentment, that they had left Liverpool.
I wouldn't say, maybe envy, but also there were so many others, you know, I mean, Nems and Brian Epstein were very keen to push other bands. I mean, they signed up quite a few. It wasn't just the Beatles they had.
Right.
You know, and so a lot of people got a break in the kind of, you know, rush of the Beatles explosion, as it were, which wasn't expected. It took a lot of people, even their management, by surprise.
No, I mean,
you know,
I think some of the girls, you know, fans were a bit miffed off that they'd got.
well, this is it. They didn't have their Beatles to go see, and it was very much a community at that time with its own little newspaper, Bill Harry and the Mersey, and all that was going on. And they, you know, it was also an interchange because they crossed the water. They played in Birkenhead, they played in Wallasey and New Brighton. In fact, there's a famous building you'll see many big concerts went to, is the Tower Ballroom. It's now sadly gone.
Yes.
But it was at one time a great venue to play. I actually played there with the Pressmen, with Jerry Lee Lewis.
Wow.
You know, and the Beatles played there with Little Richard.
They did.
You know.
And they play small venues like the Barnson's Women's Institute.
That was Boston.
You know, and I tried to get into that gig, or one of the three, never got in.
Well, you weren't a woman.
I know I wasn't a woman, but that's true. That's true. But the thing is, Liverpool couldn't contain what was happening
No.
because the record. I mean, you're right. Brian did sign, but he also took songs from the Beatles and gave those groups a leg up into the charts, didn't he? Really, you know, people like Billy J and the Foremost, Tommy Quickly, folk like that. You know, so what was happening?
Swinging Blue Jeans, all that.
Yeah, Liverpool
So many bands.
couldn't contain. They couldn't stay in Liverpool anymore because it was going beyond the city.
There's an Irish thing that my Irish musician friends tell me, the tall poppy syndrome. You're loved, and when you get too big, that maybe there's a sense of resentment that comes. Yeah, and David, Jackie Spencer, my friend, the tour guide, has said when she's doing tours around Liverpool, that sometimes as she's doing a tour, an older person might be coming by. When I say, and that's not being snarky, but
Might
somebody.
be me.
But, no, I'm sure it's not you, but somebody of the first generation Liverpudlian Beatle fans will pass her and will say out loud, I don't know what you're doing around here. They don't live here anymore. And keep walking.
Or you know, if you meet, sometimes you go back and you just meet a friend and they might say, well, I suppose you won't be talking to us now. You know, and you go, no, I'm still talking to you know, but there's that sense of you've moved on to a different place.
Right. You think you're something.
And it's somewhere they can't go. You know?
David, do you feel that? Have you
Yeah, I
seen
think
that?
it's also because I know
That's what
Jack-
fame does. You know, it's what success does that almost to everybody. You know, it's written even in Dickens. You see that in Great Expectations and things like that. Is now he can't really talk to the people where he came from. It's something that's natural, I suppose, not desirable, but it happens. You know.
You know, go ahead, David.
Yeah, like I said, I've been a tour guide for 20 years as well. And yeah, sometimes those first generation, and sometimes it is Colin. A number of times if I'm by Penny Lane, and he just comes along and shouts abuse at me. Don't listen to him, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Thanks, Colin.
Well done,
Only
Colin.
believe half of what he's telling you.
Well done, Colin. Well done. Very proud of you.
Appreciate that. But I think these days, everybody's a bit more at peace with everything. There was the bad time in a way was the 70s, because as the Beatles were doing that, and people think, oh, we're putting Liverpool on the map, it's great. Liverpool economically was going downhill. As a port, which we'd been a great international port for like 300 years, suddenly that business was going. So by the time you're talking about a band who physically left Liverpool in 63, last played there in 65 and broke up in 70. In the 70s when I'm growing up there and going to school, the prospects of getting a job, it was bleak. People were leaving the city to go and find work. So it was, who cared about this band who'd left all those years ago? It wasn't a priority. Priority was, can we get a job? Can we feed ourselves? So in the 70s, it was quite a depressing place to be. So I think if that generation can still think back and think, well, the Beatles, they did their thing, but then they left.
Thank you. So that's perfect perspective for how that way of what the city was. The one thing about in America.
Why are you talking about his glasses?
Yeah. No, in America, if you're famous for over 48 hours, we put you in the Hall of Fame. We put a star on the thing. You know, we celebrate everyone ridiculously. And there's an English sensation of, you know, it took so long, and that my wife went there in the 70s and thought the same thing. It's cold, it's grim. She was an exchange student who was miserable. It took so long for Liverpool to realize that their new identity was not shipbuilding, was not the ports, but the music. And, you know, there's so many cities. There's a perfect example here that Roswell, New Mexico, for 40 years, fought the idea of, oh, all these nutters are coming because the aliens landed here. The aliens landed here. When they finally got a mayor who put up a giant sign that said, UFO Town, USA, and made cafes and clubs, and the city's thriving. And look what Rogue Best has done with the Cavern. Rogue has built that out.
The Casbah.
The Casbah Club.
Casbah.
So, and he's built it and built a hotel, the Hard Day's Night Hotel, and he's made something of it.
No. Well, he didn't do that Hard Day's Night Hotel wrote best.
Well, the Casbah, the big family house has turned into a hotel. That's
Right,
what they've done.
that's what. Yes,
He's also opened up a museum in Matthew Street. You know, the Pete Best Museum. So yeah, Rogue's doing well. We played. Well, the Quarrymen have played with the Pete Best band. You know, I think we were in Spain with them one time. They were playing and we were on the same gig. So yeah, it's good.
Well,
but talking about how direct Liverpool people can be, there's a joke about someone said to a Scouser, "Is that right? You always answer a question with a question." And the Scouser said, "Who told you that?"
Excellent. Yeah. Beautifully done. That's absolutely perfect.
But the thing about Liverpool is that it has a great history, you know. And Dave's right, you know, in the 70s, containerization was coming in. That's what killed the docks, really, because the dockers, who'd been a huge workforce, suddenly there was no need for that many men, women, whatever, well, mainly men, you know.
Yeah.
But when people used to come around to Mendips, I love the fact that the city was embracing its musical heritage and coming to places like 24th Road and Mendips, 251 Menlove. And I always used to say, because we'd get people from around the world, and one of the things I made sure I said to everybody was, thanks for coming to Liverpool, but remember, there's more to Liverpool than just the Beatles. Because there is. It's got an incredible history, you know, and some of it is not great. Some of it has a dark side to it. But Liverpool has embraced that history. And if you come now, it's much more than what it was when I was a kid growing up in the 50s. And it is an international city now. But it wasn't an international city in the 60s, I wouldn't say.
I saw there's a giant mall there now. Liverpool won.
Liverpool won.
And to which, as I can't say it any better than Billy J. Kramer said, "Ken, did you see that mall they put up? Hey?" And you know, if you have to understand how long that paragraph is with, "Hey, hey."
Well, you know what that means. It means, tell us what you think about that, eh?
As I was telling Phil the other day, you know how if you have an iPhone, Siri or whatever, the app, if somebody leaves a message, it translates it for you and leaves the message. Whenever Billy calls me and leaves a message, my phone says, "Hi Ken, it's Billy, dash, 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 unintelligible, dash, dash, dash. Bye for now." And I listen to it and I can understand it because just my ear has been trained, because there's the Liverpool mumble, right?
Yeah,
and then and you know, that's a bit of Billy who was talking, you know, you've heard like
Oh, you're
this.
talking about that, like, yeah, there's just how they talk like that.
No, do you know the words?
Exactly what I mean.
It's just one sentence, so you don't split the words together. So all the words become like one
He
sentence.
was he was going on a plane to play, I think it was the Fest in California, and they didn't let him on the plane because they thought he was drunk. My hand to God. And they said, "Sir, have you been drinking?" "I haven't had a drink in 30 years. Sir, come with us." And I said, "You should have had him call me." "Excuse me, sir, he's not drunk. He's Liverpudlian." Like, how do you explain that? How do you explain that to someone?
How do you explain a Liverpudlian? Discuss.
The first tour we did in the UK, Billy J was the head of the bill, top of the bill.
Okay.
And he used to tell stories about him going up to Brian Epstein's flat, you know. Like rude stories. But he was very funny, and that was our first tour with Billy J.
Oh, God. Was it a blast? Did you have fun? God, it was, you know, like you talk about how fast it all happened for these guys. And Colin, you said yesterday, like we never expected to see them that fast to get to that fame. And Billy's story of overnight success, he said, I had just finished working on the railroad. He had British Rail. And his father, God bless him, the greatest gift, said, "If you don't take this chance, you'll regret it the rest of your life," and gave him the chance to try this. And you don't have any money to give your son, but to give him his blessing to take a chance, that's a big gift. And he said, they gave me, "Do you want to know a secret?" And I was asked to go to Manchester to do a music program to videotape myself. And it was, if you know the Profumo scandal, If anyone's, it's like it was a big scandal with a famous politician being caught. And you remember how, like in the Ed Sullivan Show things, they would decorate the stage with crazy things. So the song was, "Do You Want to Know a Secret?" And this was the big scandal. So they had file cabinets marked "Top Secret." So while Billy was singing, "Do you promise not to tell?" And they said, "Hey, pick up these files and just throw them around." So they had file cabinets. Let me whisper in your ear. And he did the whole thing, one take. "How's that?" "Yeah, it's good." "Don't need to do it again?" "No, we got it." Okay. He took the train home from Manchester. He went to the pub, and the bartender says, "Billy, it's your dad." "Well, yeah, Dad, what's up?" He says, "Don't come home right now." "What?" He goes, "They're on the roof. They're on the front. They're climbing. The police can't keep them away. Go the back way." And Billy climbed over the fences in the back and climbed in the window and slept at his friend's house. Because he said, "I left on a train to Manchester and nobody had any idea who I was." And that show aired. And from that moment on, my life changed in a day. Yeah. And when you think about how does a young guy, Phil, how does a young guy deal with that? What do you mean I took the train and nobody even looked at me, to "Don't come home"?
Hi.
It's nuts. How they survived. How you survive that rocket train is crazy. The Yardbirds hit. When you get to that level of fame, and you guys, this man's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with the band that he had. And I don't know, everything so much of the music I play today comes out of the Yardbirds. Jimmy Page, Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck. It was like the garden of which all this came. It's amazing when you look back at the journey. You say, "Look at this."
Yeah, it is. It is. But it's strange because at the time, like you're saying, it was all we were all a team, and they were just learning how to do it. And people say, "Oh, well, Clapton must have been great when he first came in," but not really. He was copying the bluesmen,
We were just kids having fun, weren't we, really?
Well, it's true in one sense that most of the people who become famous, they might be intending to be, but an awful lot fail. It doesn't happen. You got to have your right feet in the right place with the right person at the right time. And there's one big thing about everything to do with the world, indeed, and that is luck. You either have a lucky thing happens, or it never happens. Some guys are wonderful band, wonderful players. There are so many great players around and wonderful singers that never actually get noticed. They don't get noticed. Fame is often a question, just like I say, about being in the right place, the right time, and and the finger goes you, and that's the way it is. Happened to me like that. Just not that I'm not famous, but the way I got to America, why I'm sitting here, was the most extraordinary story that could ever have happened to me.
Tell us.
Okay, well, it was. I'd made a lot of money, and I was in the Rocky Horror Show. I was one of the original guys with that. I played saxophone for that, about 3,000 performances in London. But the funny thing about that was I know this girl who's a friend of my wife's, who happened to be a bit of a wild girl around London, and she liked a lot of parties, and she turned around and threw a party with this guy who was from the West Indies, of all places, and his name was Gordon Sarwin. At this party was plenty of these actors and actresses that were around London, and this guy happened to be playing in Hair at the time, and his name was Richard O'Brien. And I met him. We swapped numbers. He turned around and asked me one day to do a load of demos of him at Polydor Records. So I went down. I thought, well, these are a bit jiggly. I'm rather more R&B than this, a bit more rock than this. But I played all the stuff, and that was it. I thought I'd never see him again. And about 2 months later, he says, they were part of a show I was writing. And I go, oh, really? And so anyway, long story short, I end up playing the Rocky Horror Show and eventually the movie. But making the money from that show led me to turn around and go, you know, I've got enough money here, we might be able to buy a house. So that turned around and made me my second tenor player, Jeff Driscoll, in there, turned around and said, well, come down South London. He said, we were living in Hampstead at the time. And in South London, he said, it's where we all drink pints on the green outside the pub, you know, one of those sort of places. And I thought, oh, that sounds great to me. You know, so we go down all day, the only day off, a Sunday, work all day, looking at houses, house after house after house, nothing. Get to 5:30 in the evening. Now my future is about 2 hours to be changed forever. And I'm sitting there going, I'm bloody tired, I want to go home. You know. So we come out to the real estate agents, and it was my wife turns to the door, and the man is putting pictures on the door of houses they've just listed, Polaroids. And then she goes, let's go look at this one. I said, God, it's 5:30, you know, come on, we've got to get back to North London. She said, no, let's look at this one. So we do. We see it. What's the chance that we hadn't gone to see it? We see the house. The house is wonderful. I say, oh, let's go see Jeff, right? And tell him we're going to be neighbors. So we whistle over there. He's excited too. I said, what's wrong with you? And he said, oh, there's this woman. She died, she was married to her husband in 1937, and he died. I said, well, what's about that? And he said, well, he was a sax player. And I said, oh, really? And he said, and he played alto. I said, oh. I said, oh, he said, so my guy put him in, he said, and I bought the sax. I said, she's had it under her bed since 1937, before I was born. Right? And I'm sitting there going, wow. And he said, he opens it, and it's a beautiful silver Mark IV alto, Selma, and it's made in Paris from the shells of the First World War. And I'm looking at this going, wow, that's something else. And he goes, I wouldn't mind playing that sometime, because I was a tenor sax player, not an alto player. Never played an alto in my life. So he says, well, I'm not using it for a couple of days. Why don't you borrow it? I thought, oh, my Christ, you know, have me toothbrush, you know. And so I took it home, whistled home, got through the door, 5 to 8 at night now, North London, and I'm sitting there, and we're going, Masterpiece Theatre at 8 o'clock. I've got a nice cup of tea, going to sit down and watch the phone goes. I lift the phone, and we'd only been in through the door a few minutes. The phone goes, Alan Parsons, I've got a session for you. Oh, when? No, now.
Oh, Jesus, really?
Now. I went, oh, where are you? EMI Abbey Road. It's 5 minutes away down the road. I turn and say, I can be there at 9 o'clock. You see, I'm fighting the feeling all the way. I'm saying no. But the world is going, yes. You know, and so anyway, I wind up, I said, I can be there in an hour. And he goes, oh, hang on, oh, there you go, blow the session. And he goes, oh, comes back, he goes, yeah, that'll do. Go down there, AMI Abbey Road, walk in, beautiful, you know, the small studio with the big speakers, London Symphony Orchestra playing like, I'm going, oh my God, listen to this. God, I'm in this kind of mood. I'm seriously in this kind of... He goes, I want you to play right after this guitar solo right here. And I went, well, yeah, okay. And he goes, and it's got to be on alto. I went, I don't play alto, Alan, I'm a tenor player. And he goes, oh. I said, well, wait a minute, I've got one in the car. You know? You see all these pieces coming together like dominoes? I know, I get the thing, and it would have been almost as if somebody had just, this thing came through me, through my head. It was one pass. Yeah. One pass.
You had
and a
to
solo
go to...
like that. And that's the reason I'm sitting here today.
That's an amazing story.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I had to give the alto back, and I never saw it again for 50 years.
You didn't need, you only needed it that day.
Yeah.
You only needed it that night.
You want to call it God, you want to call it fate, you want to call it whatever it is, but he turned around and said, you need an alto today, and here's one.
It's amazing.
You know, how do you make that up?
No, you don't.
You know, how do you get a career by seeking that out? Somebody pointed at me and said, you. And that was it.
And Colin, for you.
Of course, there's another point to that is, once you got the alto hands, you better be able to use it.
Right. As Mark Rivera has said many times, like when a gig came, can you play Barry? Sure. I've never actually even touched one.